Hi, how you doing? So today we're going to be talking about the nitrogen cycle. Uh, First, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with just a few notes about it, what we know about it, and how it works. So, nitrogen is an odorless, colorless element produced in either a gaseous form or a mineralized form, specifically nitrogen gas and then nitrogen oxide. And then there is other forms where it can be found in ammonia. It requires a steady balance between too much and too little. Otherwise, it can be devastating to our agriculture and human life in general, as well as marine life. It can be very devastating to that. Plants need it to produce their organic material in which they produce fruits or vegetables or just things like that. Without it, they sort of yellow out and they have stunted growth. When they have too much of it, they can produce excess biomass and organic material while not creating enough roots to sustain all that excess biomass. Too much nitrogen can also pollute waterways and hurt aquatic life. So essentially, any sort of rivers that it can get into can also leak out into the ocean and harm aquatic life, not just fish, but also things like seaweed, coral, just things like that. And when there is too much nitrogen, what happens is a process called eutrophication, where is basically excess biomass and all that stuff being made, causing the massive growth of algae and other massive growth of plants without enough, water to sustain that kind of life. So the 5 different stages of the nitrogen cycle. The first one is nitrogen fixation, in which the nitrogen moves from the atmosphere into the soil. And although the nitrogen on Earth is great, most of it is unavailable to the plants on Earth, and this is because they're mostly in a gaseous form and cannot be used directly by plants. It must be transformed in a process called nitrogen fixation, where a small amount of nitrogen can be fixed when lightning provides energy needed for N2 to react to oxygen, producing nitrogen oxide. This is when plants are able to use this, and it brings us to our second stage, which is mineralization. It takes place in the soil, where nitrogen moves from organic materials to an inorganic form that plants are able to use. Like manure, dead animals, things like that. When plants die and decompose, mineralization occurs where microbes act on it and convert it to a form where it can be used again by plants, except for legumes, such as like peanuts and all those kinds of things. The third stage is nitrification. This also occurs in soils, and then during this cycle, ammonia in the soils produced during mineralization is converted into compounds called nitrites, otherwise known in the chemistry term as NO2, and nitrates, which is NO3. These can be used by plants and animals that consume the plants. This takes us into stage 4, which is immobilization, sometimes known as reverse mineralization. These two processes together control the amount of nitrogen in soils and is mainly used by microorganisms who live in the soils. They pull the nitrogen from the soil, and when decomposing organisms don't carry enough, this makes these forms of nitrogen unavailable to plants and may cause nitrogen deficiency. And then this takes us to our last stage, which is denitrification. Nitrogen returns to the atmosphere as they are converted to atmospheric nitrogen, which is nitrogen gas. by bacteria through a process called denitrification. So this is essentially the entire cycle, where it moves from the atmosphere into the soil, moving through different courses of the soil, and then going back into the atmosphere. Specifically, what we're mainly looking at is a transformation through the atmosphere into the geosphere, into the biosphere, back into the geosphere, and then back into the atmosphere. I have a diagram right here which basically explains that, where we are looking at N2 right here, going through nitrogen fixation and going into the soil, where nitrogen fixing bacteria takes hold of it. Manure also gets placed down by this cow right here. That gets into the soil that way. But in other words, with this nitrogen fixing bacteria, it turns it into NH3, and then it's nitrified, where it can go back and forth between these two, can go back and forth. Nitrification can then go into denitrification and then back into the atmosphere. And this other cycle or process called assimilation is where the roots of the plant or tree, I guess, will essentially just take up the nitrogen through the soil through this bacteria. So the way that humans are involved with it is that they can both hurt and cause more nitrogen production in nitrogen fertilizers, as well as I believe what it is cars. They can use emissions from cars also causes nitrogen it causes a nitrogen deficiency. And the way it affects mostly ocean life is through what I know as far as how it works is that it mostly hurts oceanic life. However, I'm sure that in other ways that nitrogen can help oceanic life, considering that there are coral reefs and different kinds of plants down there that are consumed by the fish that are under the sea. So another good diagram would be this one right here. Nitrogen can go through the soil into the ocean, going back through the ocean and then back up into the atmosphere. It's just another way of denitrification, essentially. So yeah, that's basically the nitrogen cycle. I hope you enjoyed the video, and have a good day.